affordability, and reducing the costs of home ownership. According to the National Association of Realtors, just 5 years ago, the median age for a first-time homebuyer in the United States was 33 years. Today, it is 40. President Trump is determined to reduce the cost of getting into a home, so he's floating the idea of offering 50-year mortgages. Well, joining us to provide some insights is Young Voices spokesperson Sofia Hamilton. Sofia, before we discuss the 50-year mortgages proposal, please explain for our viewers what's happening in the housing market. It seems like the American dream is fading away for young adults.
As you mentioned, the median first-time homebuyer is now 40 years old. So for our younger generations, buying a home seems almost impossible. It feels so out of reach. And that's because housing prices have continually been increasing while everything else is getting more expensive and our wages are staying relatively stagnant. So it's really a simple economics issue. We don't have enough supply to meet the increasing demand for housing. So prices for housing have skyrocketed.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because President Trump has made no secret about his dislike of Federal Reserve Chairman Powell. But I suspect Powell's hesitancy to lower interest rates isn't the only reason housing costs are so high. The median sale price of a U.S. home in November of 2020, that was just 5 years ago, was $315,000. Today, $440,000. Wow. So why are they so expensive?
Well, we have a growing population, and so we have more people looking to buy homes. I saw during the COVID pandemic in real time in my home state of Florida, housing prices absolutely skyrocket because so many people wanted to come and move into Florida because we had more relaxed regulations around COVID and just on our economy in general. So we're seeing increased demand for housing. And I think that's been the primary reason why we have seen prices go up. I think there's some things that the federal government can do, but this is really at its core. Housing is a state and local issue.
Well, you'll probably get a lot more people down in Florida now that Mamdani won the election in New York City. A lot of New Yorkers heading down there. So President Trump has floated this idea of a 50-year mortgage to get the monthly payment down. So you don't like that idea, do you? Why?
I don't think it's going at the core problem that we're having, which is supply. And so I think it's great that President Trump is acknowledging that we have a housing problem and that so many young people cannot afford to get themselves in homes. And that's really at the core of the American dream, is to buy a home and build your family in that home. So I appreciate him coming with a proposal with the 50-year mortgages, but it's really not going at the core problem. And so looking at the 50-year mortgages, people who are much better at math than I am have done the math, and it looks about, compared to a 15 and a 30-year mortgage, you'd be saving around $120 to $250 a month. And that's great. That's some nice pocket change, but that really doesn't make it more accessible to buy a home. And if $200 is in between you and purchasing a home, buying a home is probably not a good financial decision. But that's to each their own. That's a personal financial choice. What gets really scary is when you look at the interest payments. So if you stick out that entire 50-year mortgage compared to a 15 or a 30-year mortgage, the interest that you'd pay on that home almost, or sometimes even more, doubles. It depends on the case, but that home becomes much more expensive because the amount of time that you have to accrue interest is so much longer than in our shorter term mortgages.
Yeah, you'd be in debt for another 20 years longer than a 30-year mortgage, and then a $400,000 home. I saw a statistic would be well over $1 million the lifetime of that loan. So what are some better solutions?
So as I was saying, housing is really a state and local issue. And what's really been hampering us building up our supply of housing to meet the growing demand has been local and state zoning laws. So a lot of people aren't aware that the state and local governments can tell you what type of housing you can build, where you can build that housing, when you can build that housing, and in some cases, what that housing can look like. And so your state governments are getting into the aesthetics of homes and having all of these other arbitrary barriers that make it incredibly difficult to build more housing. And that also adds to the cost and the time that it takes to build that housing. So our supply cannot grow with the same rate that our demand is. And that's really been what's making it more difficult for younger generations to find homes, condos, apartments that they can buy and afford.
Okay, more affordable housing. Sofia Hamilton, Young Voices spokesperson. Thank you, Sofia, for setting us straight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.